Paul Manafort, who is he and how closely is he linked to Donald Trump? Paul Manafort, the former chairman of Donald Trump's election campaign, has been charged with money laundering and conspiracy against the United States. The charges against him and his associate Rick Gates were produced by the special counsel investigation into alleged Russian meddling in last year's presidential election. Both men have pleaded not guilty to the charges, which also include making false and misleading statements and acting as unregistered agents of Ukraine's former pro-Russian government. Find out more about Mr. Manafort and his links to the president. Mr. Manafort is a veteran Republican operative and international lobbyist. A lawyer by training, he rounded up delegates for former President Gerald Ford at the 1976 Republican Convention and helped manage former President Ronald Reagan's convention efforts in 1980. That year, he founded a lobbying firm, known as Black, Manafort, Stone and Kelly, and earned a reputation for his willingness to take on less than savory clients, including Democratic Republic of Congo's dictator Mobutu Sese Seko. Later, as an advisor to Ukraine's pro-Russian Party of Regions, Mr. Manafort helped the party turn around its reputation as corrupt and under Russian influence, getting Ukraine's president elected in 2006. He remained an advisor to the Party of Regions until 2014, when it was ousted amid popular protests. Mr. Manafort's connection with Mr. Trump reportedly goes back to the 1980s. Business Insider said that's when Mr. Trump hired Mr. Manafort's lobbying firm to help the Trump Organization. The publication reported that in 2006, Mr. Manafort and his wife bought an apartment in Trump Tower in New York, which Mr. Manafort still owns and lives in when he's in Manhattan. As well, Mr. Manafort and Mr. Trump have a mutual close friend, businessman Thomas Barrack. That connection and Mr. Manafort's perceived skill in Republican Party politics reportedly led to Mr. Manafort getting involved in Mr. Trump's presidential campaign. Mr. Manafort joined the campaign in March 2016, and was chairman from June to August, with Mr. Gates as his deputy. Mr. Manafort is accused of laundering money and hiding payments from U.S. authorities. The indictment against Mr. Manafort and Mr. Gates says they both generated tens of millions of dollars of income from Ukraine work and laundered money through scores of U.S. and foreign entities to hide payments from U.S. authorities between 2006 and at least 2016. More than $75 million allegedly flowed through Mr. Manafort's and Mr. Gates' offshore accounts. Mr. Manafort allegedly laundered more than $18 million. The indictment also alleges Mr. Manafort and Mr. Gates, along with others, conspired to defraud the United States by impeding, impairing, obstructing, and defeating the lawful governmental functions of the Department of Justice and the Treasury Department between 2006 and 2017.